You're particularly critical on this issue of loss and damage. And again, especially in the United States, these climate change negotiations are hardly being covered. When you say loss and damage, explain what that means in real terms.
That means the support for the most vulnerable, the poorest people who are already losing their lives and livelihoods, and who are going to deal with ever-increasing climate impacts, largely because of the responsibility of rich developed countries who've grown fat and rich from carbon pollution. Now what we're seeing in the halls behind us is a biggest contract. Now you've got the United States, also backed by the European Union, saying we actually support loss and damage, as long as loss and damage doesn't mean that we have to provide support for those most vulnerable. So what we're seeing is that they're willing to accept the words, but put a caveat in that they're no longer responsible. We see the same thing on the 1.5 degree target. Rich developed countries who've never had any indication that they would support such a meaningful target are saying they support it, but without delivering any of the concrete ambition that's needed now, not tomorrow. The same with climate finance. They're not paying their fair share.
Say what you mean by climate finance.
So rich countries have got a legal, and it's a legal as well as a moral obligation to help poorer countries deal with the existing climate impacts and to be able to grow cleanly. We remember we live in a deeply unequal world where poorer countries are still struggling with many of the challenges around poverty. And rich countries who are responsible for this crisis have taken on a legal obligation. What's happening behind us in these halls is those rich countries now want to shift the burden of responsibility from the rich to the poor. So they want to pass the tab to the poor, and that's what's being fought over. Many people talk about President Obama's legacy in terms of on climate change. Unfortunately, the legacy he will leave here is a poison chalice to the poor, to actually make them pay for the impacts of climate change. Unfortunately, I don't see much difference between the United States now and the United States in Copenhagen.
Wait, a poison chalice to the poor. Explain what you mean about what the U.S. role is here and around the issue overall of climate change.
Well, the United States here is primarily the bad guy. They are keeping an alliance of countries together, mainly of the rich developed countries. They brought on the European Union together with them. What they're trying to do is rewrite the legal rules that are taking place here.
Now, I want to clarify, a big news headline came out yesterday. There's the High Ambition Group. It was kept under wraps, secret for 6 months, and they unveiled themselves in the last few days. Over 100 of the world's countries, so more than half the countries, led by the United States.
Yeah, smoke and mirrors. I mean, a high ambition alliance of countries who have got no ambition. The United States, which is doing 1/5 of its fair share. The European Union, which is doing 1/5 of its fair share. They're not doing any of their fair share in providing the finance or the technology or the support. So how they can call themselves the high ambition alliance? What this really is about trying to shift blame. If we look back to Copenhagen, we knew that the blame then was on India. Now the blame is on India and on China. Now the blame is on India.
So wait, on this issue of who's in the coalition and who's not, China and India are not in this coalition.
No. So what the United States has managed to do, and of course, look, this is geopolitics. We're talking about one of the most powerful countries in the world. It's managed to get people to sign up to a paper agreement. It actually doesn't mean anything. In reality, what we're seeing, and we saw last night in the halls here, is every single developing country come out very, very strongly, saying they oppose the attempt by the United States to rewrite the legal rules here, to rip up the legal protection, because what we are talking about is the protection to the poor, the most vulnerable, and the poorer countries around the world. They want to rip up that protection. They want to take the responsibility of their pollution and put it onto the poor. That was rejected by developing countries. And in the next 36 hours, what we're going to see is either a lowering of expectations, a bullying and bribing of poorer countries to shift the blame. But in reality, there is a crime scene on there, but the criminal here is the United States.